Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good evening. Welcome to tonight's Climate Times Transportation Academic Track Forum. I'm the hostess today, Jhin Chua from Tsinghua University. According to the coronavirus, our delegates could not only join our forum like at the scene, but also through our global live broadcast. This is our third time to hold such graduate GOG forums. I'm very honored to take this role and thank you all for being with us. First of all, I would like to introduce our guests of honor. They are Liu Huan, Associate Professor of School of Environment at Tsinghua University, International Fellow of International Center for Sustainability Studies, and Sun Weizhe, Assistant Researcher of the School of Environment, Environmental Remote Sensing Aspects at Tsinghua University. Now, I would like to invite Professor Liu Huan to give a speech to us all. Welcome.
Thanks to the maritime transportation, we could purchase products from all over the world. However, we've got a big problem on our hands with global warming. Today, we are going to talk about the shipping decarbonization from a research perspective. I'm Huan Liu from Tsinghua University School of Environment. So recently, we know that IPCC ER6 has already been released, and this report reaffirms with high confidence that there is a near linear relationship between the cumulative CO2 emissions and also global warming, the global temperature of the surface. So each 1,000 gigaton CO2 is assessed to likely cause a 0.27 to 0.63 degrees Celsius increase in global surface temperature, with a best estimation of about 0.45. So this relationship implies that every ton of carbon dioxide emitted contributes to global warming. So shipping actually is one of the major greenhouse gas emitters. We know that as a backbone of the global trade and the international global economy, maritime transport accounts for more than 80% of the global trade by volume. But ship emits billions of tons of greenhouse gases per year. So if we consider every 10 seconds is about 300 tons, so very large. And it's equivalent to the 6th largest emitting country. So this is a big challenge for keeping warming under 2 degrees Celsius. And on the other hand, shipping is also a major sector which contributes to the criteria pollutants globally or regionally, so which also deteriorate the air quality near the coast. And we know that most of the residents actually living near the coast region. So this is why we should pay a lot of attention to shipping emissions. And on the other hand, when we consider the globalization process, under the current trends, if we consider 1.5 degree scenario, actually, if there's no further reduction on the shipping section, 60% to 220% of the allowable CO2 emissions are expected to be consumed by shipping sector itself by 2050. So this is a big challenge. And also this figure listed that shipping is one of the hardest sectors to have those reduced emissions. So this is something we are facing right now. But why the shipping is very hard to be the reduction sector? So we can say that right now the related regulation was intentionally set outside the national allocation scheme in either Kyoto Protocol or Paris Climate Agreement. So to this end, the International Maritime Organization, IMO, they announced a very aggressive target, which is to reduce 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 compared to 2008. And also IMO provided a wide list of the candidate measures. However, these are very ambitious targets for shipping emissions reduction, and the challenges for the mechanism design call for new approaches to encourage decarbonization. And scholarly and political dialogues for the past 3 decades focus on a UNFCC-based approach to regulate the international shipping emissions. And for the UNFCC-based approach, they recommended 8 options. And after the comparison, finally, 5 options were recommended to allocate the shipping emission into countries. So the first option is no allocation. And then the other 4 options is allocate the ships' transnational activity emissions to individual countries based on either the bunker fuel sale or the company or the vessel registration, all based on the departure or destination of the vessel or cargo. However, studies found that if we choose different way of the allocation, actually the results would be very different. And there is no accurate model to help the policy makers to determine how to do this allocation. So right now, the choice of these allocation options is number 1, so which is no allocation. However, if we just want to achieve this greenhouse gas reduction solely based on the ship owners or the operators, it's the potential of the reduction actually is very limited. So this makes us to think about how to accelerate the shipping decarbonization by motivate different stakeholders. So here we raised a new idea from the supply chain perspective. We know that originally we have this polluter pay principle, and offshoring makes the producer and the consumers to be separate. So everyone can purchase products everywhere, and then here shipping become a very important sector. And recently, although there are studies based on the supply chain to account for the consumer-based emissions instead of the production end emissions, however, the transportation process emission have not been included. So this is why we want to have a perspective from the supply chain perspective to say what is the role of the transportation and how it can be linked to the upstream and downstream. But the first thing we want to do is to make an accurate accounting, because accurate accounting of the shipping emission is the benchmark for the scheme design. So we developed a new model which is called the Shipping Emission Inventory Model, SIM. So this model is considered as the 3rd generation of the shipping emission models. So compared with the 1st generation and the 2nd generation model, this model used the Lagrange calculation approach. So later I will explain a little bit why this model can give us accurate accounting. So this is the 2nd generation model. We have those ships and they can send signals which can be captured by either satellite or the land-based sensors. And then this method will have the grid aggregation of those signals to make a calculation of the total emissions inside of that grid. However, this will bring a lot of uncertainty, because if there are signals missing, like this one, or there are duplicated signals, then the calculation will be not accurate. So our new approach of this SIM is trying to match two databases together. One is the AIS database, and another is the static database of each ship. So we can identify those AIS signals from the same ship and then rank them by the time. So we can regenerate the trajectory of this ship. And using those regenerated trajectory, we use the interpolation method to calculate emissions. So by this method, if there are signal loss or there are repeated signals, it doesn't matter because we give the emissions on this trajectory, on this voyage. So based on this new approach, we calculate each voyage and then we get a global scale emission inventory. So by this method, we can have accurate estimation of the global shipping emissions. And then it brings us some new knowledge on the climate and health impact. So on one hand, we evaluated the radiative forcing from the shipping emissions in East Asia. And then we find actually the shipping impact on the radiative forcing is strong cooling. So this is because there are a lot of sulfur dioxide emitted from the shipping exhaust. And we know that if sulfur dioxide was released into the atmosphere, it would be further converted into sulfate, so which is a strong cooling component in the particulate matters. So this is why that we see the number is cooling. But it differs from previous understanding. We estimate the radiation forcing is 20 times higher than the previous estimation. So it's a strong cooling. However, it doesn't last very long because the CO2 emissions from the shipping will last much longer than the sulfur dioxide, than the sulfate. So about after 7 years, the emissions from shipping is become warming. So this is a dynamic change of the radiative forcing. And on the other hand, the shipping emissions will lead a large impact on the human health. So in East Asia, it will lead to about 24,000 premature deaths every year. This is based on 2013 evaluation. And right now, we have understand that the climate and health impacts from the shipping is very large. And the next step, we want to update our emission model of the SIM to SIM 2, version 2. This is because if we pay attention to not only the global scale emissions, but also the regional scale emissions. So for example, for the China coastal region, we know that the coastal line is complex and there are a lot of signal missing. So if we just using two points to get a line, we will have a lot of trajectories actually cross the land. So it makes the emission calculation not accurate. So then in this new version, we have the route restoration module, and we can have the module to identify whether a ship is the ocean-going vessel or the coastal vessel or a river vessel, because they will use different fuels. And we have a policy adjustment module to evaluate different policies impacts on the shipping emissions. So with this updated SIM model, we have several years of the global shipping emission inventory, and we can calculate it day by day, month by month, and also give the distribution by different ship types. And we compare the CO2 emissions from this SIM model to other studies, and we can see that the total amount of the CO2 and the major air pollutants are actually very consistent with the IMO recent newly study. And our study can provide a good trend and a very detailed distribution. So by now, we have a good understanding on the shipping emissions and also their impacts on the atmosphere and also on the human health. So this is what we have done to link the human activity with the atmospheric system. However, if we want to get the goal of the mitigation, we want a further step, which is link back to the driven force. So we know that shipping activity is generated because of there are needs for the material flow globally. So we want to say, based on the maritime transportation, can we not just go this direction to evaluate its impacts, but we also go this direction to see their link with the trade. And then we did some research. The first thing is we try to explore what the global material flow is, and based on the evaluation, we can get not only the price, not only the total value, but also the total volume of the material flow. And then we developed a new tool, which is called TraceSim. The TraceSim is based on SIM, but we can have the identification of those arrival and the departure port. And then we identify those voyage which links those OD. OD is origin and destination, so it's an OD pair. And then we identify all the voyages linked that, so we can have these results. So this is taken US and China bilateral trade as an example. So we identified how much shipping emissions are for the two countries' bilateral trade. And we know that the trade value or trade amount between China's export to US and the US export to China actually differs a lot. So it's 2.6 times. However, when we evaluate the shipping emissions, those two directions doesn't differ a lot. It's just 40% differences. So this is the total amount. And then the new knowledge based on this TraceSim model is originally based on the AIS observation, we can only know the ships, the vessel types contribution to the total emissions. So this is why our control can only target it at each type of the ships. However, by the TraceSim model, we can link those emissions back to what the driving force is. So those are the cargoes. And then the new knowledge is to determine the commodity-related shipping emissions. And then we find for the China's export, there are a lot of emissions related with the machinery and the electrical equipment. And for US export, there are a lot related to like vegetable products, wood, and paper, and others. So this is the difference. And then with this evaluation, we can put it back into the supply chain. So we can say that if we consider the shipping emissions in the supply chain, actually it will contribute to 16% of the total emissions. This is taking sulfur dioxide as an example. And this is significant to the US export because that will contribute another 58% in the supply chain, while to China export it only contributes to 9%. And with these emissions, the air quality also changed. It contributes to like 0 to up to 1.13 microgram per cubic meters PM2.5 concentrations. And a lot of the concentration risks happen not only in China coastal or US coastal, but also near the trajectory. So the problem is then we have the health impacts. If we consider the production versus the transportation end of the health impacts, we will say that the health impact of the transportation occurs in the regions outside of the China and the US. There are 34% of them. So that makes another issue is those beneficiaries and who are taking the consequences are not the same. So this brings a new challenge is how can we determine the final scheme to evaluate the responsibility? So if we evaluate based on the trade value, based on this case, China and the US bilateral trade contributes about 3.4%. But if we consider the greenhouse gas emissions, it's about 2.5%. However, if we consider the premature deaths, it's 4.8%. So it shows the complexity of the responsibility allocation, and it for sure needs a systematical analysis. So the next step is how can we expand a case study into a global scale? And actually right now there are already few studies attempts to link the shipping emissions with trade with this bottom-up evaluations. So by bottom-up, I mean those from very basic, detailed information to calculate up level to get a total emission. So there are two studies. One is we just showed the China-US bilateral trade example, and another one is a Brazil case study. But this one is based on Weibio. So the Weibio for every voyage is accounted and gets the emissions. But currently, those methods, none of those methods can be expanded to a global scale because it has those commercially sensitive information, and a lot of this sensitive information is inaccessible to a global scale. So right now, there is still a technical challenge in forming a comprehensive assessment to get this trade-linked shipping emissions. So we developed a new approach, which is called the Voisim GTEMS model chain. This model includes two models. The first one is a Voisim model. So this Voisim model is quite similar with what we have at the beginning. So we have those global AIS signals of those ships, and then we use our SIM model to do the dynamic power-based calculation of the emissions. And then we introduce the TreeSim model to get the voyage identification to know the OD of each trajectory. And then a very important step is we can calculate the EEOI, which is the energy efficiency operation index for each of the voyage, for each of the ship, and every time when they ship from one country to another, from one port to another port. So we can have meanings of the EEOI calculated based on our observation. And then we aggregated this EEOI into the country-based EEOI, country and vessel type-based EEOI. So we can pass this kind of into our second model, which is a GTEMS model. So GTEMS model starts from the global economy data. We have that bilateral trade data included. So we know for each of the trade pairs, what type of commodity they trade and how much they trade. And then we use the seaborne fraction to determine whether they transport this kind of cargo by land or by plane or by ship. So we can determine how much are transported by the ships. And then we have a commodity vessel linkage to determine which kind of vessel will be used to transport this kind of commodity. So finally, we will have the vessel capacity needed, and then we combine it with we generated the global shipping route network, so we can have the final emissions embodied in the trade. And we have about 1.2 million of those trade flow included in this model. So we can get the results. On one hand, this is the Voisim results. So this is based on the observation from the satellite, observe each ship. So we can calculate the international shipping CO2 emissions. And this is the new one, which is based on the GTEMS. So you can say this is already standardized. So from those voyage-based energy efficiency index, we can calculate the total emissions. The more important thing is, because of this methodology, we can then interpret global shipping by the trade emission matrix. So in this matrix, we can say many emissions are from each pair of the trade. So for each trade partners, we know their emission amount. And we also know the emission for each cargo. And the other thing is we can evaluate their performance by the efficiency. So we include two indicators. One is the efficiency based on each ton of the cargo, and if this cargo was shipped by 1 nautical miles, how much CO2 emissions are. And another is if based on not the weight but the value, if they have those $1 export, $1 trade, and shipped by 1 nautical miles, how much emissions are. So those two will show the performance of the global shipping. And it actually determines whether the trade countries are willing to use higher efficiency ships, or they just want to use cheap but not so efficient ships. So by this method, we can allocate ship emission to bilateral trades. And also, we can determine the commodity-based shipping emissions. So from among the about 100 commodity chapters at HS2 digital level, international freight transportation of the mineral fuel, which is HS27, contributes about 35% of the shipping emissions. And ores contribute about 8.7%, and there are several other important sectors. And then we can determine the efficiency. So this is like the performance of the different commodity. So we can say for those parts, they actually have lower TEI weight index. So it means they show good performance. This is because they are all bulker commodity, so they were transported by those high efficiency bulker vessels. And for those parts, they are high value but low weight commodity. So they will have relatively high TEIW but low TEIV. So this can give us the heterogeneity of the commodity-based shipping emissions. And then we have this scenario to see how much emission reduction can we achieve if we use this Voisim G-times model. So we make an assumption that for each country, the total export and import volume of each commodity will not be changed. We leave them unchanged. However, we will change their partner. So they may not purchase from country A, but instead they purchase it from country B. And for every country, this is no harm to their economy because the total export or import are still the same. Just to change the partner. So the maximum CO2 emission reduction potential can achieve about 38% of current total of the shipping CO2 emissions. So this is a very large potential because it's equivalent to about 284 trillion grams of the CO2 emissions. So this is a big amount. And this is no need of extra technology, just the optimization of the trade partners. So this implies that there are great potential to have these trade-linked shipping emission scenarios. So as a summary here for the accounting and the evaluation. And thank you very much. This is the acknowledgements and also related articles. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Liu Huan, for the fascinating speech. And next, we will proceed to the part of our roundtable discussion. And all the delegates, you now are welcome to share your viewpoints with each other. Firstly, let's welcome Jack Lam to share his point. Is there a case to be made for cities and NGOs' contributions to global environmental governance? If so, which actor is more important in mitigation? Welcome.
Good evening, fellow organizers, teachers, and students, and fellow colleagues. My name is Jack Lam. I come from Schwarzman College at Tsinghua University. Tonight, I just wanted to share with you one of my research on climate change governance with city networks and NGO connection worldwide. When former US President Donald Trump decided on the withdrawal of its country from the Paris Agreement, I think worldwide attention has been transfixed on states or countries' participation in climate action. And that is when I started to think about, is that state-based traditions of climate actions are the only avenues for intercity or transnational climate governance. And I think the preoccupation of a status narrative not only leaves NGOs and city governments' role unexamined, but it also detracts from their capacity for furthering climate actions. I studied some of the examples such as G40 cities leadership networks, which I think throughout the week we also briefly touched on them, and also US Conference of Mayors and Eurocities. These city networks serve as the loci for international and interregional normative socialization, when they, in fact, reinforce the norms already set by the states, such as in the First United Conference on Climate Change. And a second role of their contributions to intercity governance in climate change is that it also conducts research on the checkpoints of compliance for different city governments, as they share a lot of resources, such as the experience of Los Angeles and London combating air pollution. And the last point I want to make with these non-state actors is that they, in fact, proactively take stock of government's performance. They also have a memorandum of understanding as they exercise normative pressures over their peers. And one example will be that they might not be effective at enforcement of laws, but they tremendously are affirmative of the city's trajectories of reducing carbon emission. And today I wanted to talk to you about this non-state opportunities in mitigation, because it really presents the case for sub-state environmentalism, and it will help us to make common cause not only with the government but also with the NGOs and the private sector to deliberate at all levels of environmental governance. In other words, intergovernmental governance coupled with multi-level governance is critical to effective mitigation and adaptation at the front lines of climate change. That will be my brief presentation of the case, and I look forward to discussing with you guys more in this roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you for your sharing, Jack Lam. And I know everybody may have really inspiring points and want to share with us and discuss with each other, but don't worry, just after the roundtable discussion part, we have time for everyone to start a more specific discussion. So you guys may take notes and look forward for that. And next, let's welcome Zhang Guohua to share the research on the carbon neutral path of manufacturing plus shipping. Welcome. Zhang Guohua, are you online and can you hear us? And now it's your turn to share your viewpoints about the research on the carbon neutral path of manufacturing plus shipping. Okay, so we may just speak Zhang Guohua, and then if Mr. Zhang, like if you are online, you could type in words to give a brief explanation. And when you enter our Zoom room, you could also just click us and then share information to us, and then we'll give you a translator. So now let's welcome Hiroki Kawabe. Kawabe-san. To talk about the team workshop with interactive simulation for industry stakeholders and policymakers towards reduction of GHG emission in maritime transportation. Welcome. Hiroki Kawabe-san, can you hear us? There may be some problems with our broadcasting platform. We are sorry about it, and then our staff is working with it right now, so please wait for a second. Thank you for your patience.就电脑声音。 Dear delegates, our staff are still working with the machines. Please wait for a minute. Thank you for your cooperation and patience.
featured decisions with each other. My team workshop as a case study with an interactive simulator of maritime transportation. This is an example of the interactive simulation where 4 players are assigned a regulator and 3 shipping companies. The regulator decides regulations, carbon tax, and subsidies for CO2 reduction equipment. The shipping companies decide how many and what kind of ships to purchase and how fast to operate them. The total CO2 emissions and profits of each company for each year are calculated from the decisions made by each player and the shipping operation model. This has conducted a hands-on workshop using a simplified bridge simulator. The participants experienced the decision-making process of about 10 years using the simulator. The workshop suggested a policy that regulators should encourage shipping companies to maximize the sales and minimize the GHG emissions of each company. That is, to maximize the sales per GHG emissions respectively increasing the subsidy for eco-friendly equipment and the carbon tax on emitted GHGs. This is the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you for listening so much.
Thank you for your sharing. And next, let's welcome Juan Gohan to share his research on the carbon neutral path of manufacturing plus shipping. Welcome. Mr. John, you may try to share your screen directly. Hiroki Kawabe-san, could you please try to close your screen sharing on your side? In this way, other delegates could share their screens. Thank you. Hiroki Kawabe-san, there is a close sharing screen button, so you may click that button and try one more time. Thank you. we can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm not sure the.
But now in this video interview, yeah, thank you. So, Zhang Gohan, you may start sharing your research on the carbon neutral path of manufacturing plus shipping. Welcome.
Hello everyone. Today I'm going to introduce our research on the integration of ocean distribution and manufacturing to achieve carbon neutrality at sea. Normally, when we talk about carbon Can anyone hear me? I can hear through a receiver.
We can hear you now, but the screen.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Hello everyone. Today I'm going to introduce our research on the integration of ocean transportation and manufacturing to achieve carbon neutrality at sea. Normally, when we talk about carbon neutrality transportation, we always thinking about doing the innovation of ship design itself, but not think about the transport materials or products in the ship. But today, our research team aims to improve carbon neutrality by integrating the ocean transportation and manufacturing of the shipping glass material, woodboard as an example. Together to decrease the carbon emission of the entire wood value chain. Here is our ideal business model. The vessel is transporting the woodboard. Normally, we are doing wood drying process on the industrial drying kilns, which need fossil fuels to provide energy and produce huge carbon emissions, even sulfur emissions. And now, we transfer the wood drying process to the shipping riders and try to use the circulation system for ship off itself. So the warehousing space in the cargo ship to dry the wood. And we use the circulation system of ship itself to dry the wood by technological innovation during the shipping time. So all the energy for wood drying process comes from the special collected last waste heat of riders and retail gas. And there's hot air unit for hot air circulation. So we no longer need to burn the fossil fuel to provide any heat energy for wood drying. Now we can see under this model, we collected the exhaust heat of ship, so we reduce the ship exhaust and we save the burning fuel and decrease the transportation. So the simplified chain directly contributes to the reduction of carbon dioxide emission during the transportation. So for the future innovation under this model, we can also extend and do integration of shipping and various sub-items of manufacturing industries, including onboard timber fireproofing service, onboard biological pump manufacturing, and even extend this model to on-land transportation, for example, on trucks. So we can do wood drying process on trucks, or even other sub-items of
some problems with your internet connection. Juan Gohan. Could you try to please connect the Zoom platform again? Okay, so please take your time, Juan Gohan, and we will wait for you. So if you come back to our Zoom room, please contact us and we will welcome you to share your research. Thank you. And then next, let's welcome Huang Xinyin to give a presentation, a cost-benefit analysis of intermediate stock operation in aviation. Welcome.
Huang Xinyin. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you and see you.
Please wait a minute. I'll share my screen.
Sure.
So, can you see my screen?
Actually, at the same we could now our screen sharing. But just on my phone on the platform. But just on my phone on the Zoom platform.
Okay. So maybe I'll quit and enter again.
Sure.
Can you see here now?
I think there's no problem through the Zoom platform. Yeah, you may start your presentation. Welcome.
Okay, so I'll start. So, hello everybody, I'm Clear Wang from UCL, and it's a very great honor for me to attend this meeting. So, I'll share my research of cost-benefit analysis of intermediate stock operation. So, firstly, I'll give a brief introduction of my research. So, my research is based on the concept of intermediate stock operation, which is also known as the ISO. So the concept is aimed at fuel efficiency could be optimized when airlines choose to set intermediate stops during the routes. And from the previous literature review, we can see that generally ISO could achieve 10 to 50% of fuel saving, and also the detour factor and the fraction factor should be addressed for setting the intermediate stops, since the corresponding conclusion is that the intermediate stop halfway with the lowest detour is the best strategy. So we can see here from the left table. So based on the concepts, I conduct a case study based on the routes of London to Dubai and London to Beijing. So from the cost comparison here, it is easy to see that fuel saving is positive in all three airport types. However, the fuel cost reduction ratios are relatively low compared to results from the previous literature. And as for the landing costs, we can see here it is obvious that ISO will have more landings, thus leading to a dramatic increase compared to direct flights. So as for the passenger demand, to track for the passenger demands, this research collected passenger booking data from the market intelligence database for all routes. And the conclusion is very obvious that passengers show a strong preference to direct flights. However, except for their preference to direct flights, service-related factors are also accounted for the choice factor. So, as for the airport effects, it is easy to see that the total passenger number shows an increasing trend. And it could be also verified that growing passenger flow will result in growing airport revenue, especially in commercial revenue. And it is also easy to see that the airport helps create new jobs, including jobs in the aviation sector and more jobs elsewhere from the related supply chain. So based on the research above, the following conclusion could be drawn. So firstly, from the cost side, So from the cost side, we could see that ISO has very negative effects on passenger demand since passengers show dramatically higher preference to direct flights. Also, there are some negative environmental impacts, including the noise problems, air pollution, as well as the impacts of the regional environment. And the benefits are also very clear. Firstly, the saving ratio related to the aircraft size is very clear, and the case study outcome of the saving is less than 10%, but the positive conclusion of fuel efficiency improvement is constant. And there are also some positive effects in airport revenue improvement as well as regional employment. However, there are some logistic constraints, including the passenger demand problem as well as the delay problem. Offsetting flights with two ranges will increase the possibility of delay. And also, adding extra stops requires activities of landing, parking, and taking off. So in this regard, it is very difficult to meet all requirements for companies based on the above. So this is about my research. So thank you all.
Thank you for sharing. And next, let's welcome Shravin Vasisjam to talk about Indian urban mobility system, analysis of drivers and barriers influencing the transition from fossil fuel-based mobility to electricity-based mobility. Welcome. Shravin Vasisjam, can you hear us? You may start your screen sharing and your presentation. Okay, so if you go back to our Zoom room, please contact us, and we are waiting for your presentation. And next, let's welcome Sun Lushun to talk about revealing interstructural low-carbon economic development inequalities from the perspectives of industrial heterogeneity and scale economy, a case study of China's 29 excuse me?
Hello everyone, my name is Sun Lushun from Shanghai Jiao Tong University. It's very honored to introduce my research. It's reviewing interstructural low-carbon economic development inequalities, a case study of China's 29 non-ferrous metal industries. As for the research background, as we can see from the table, different subsectors of non-ferrous metal industries have different carbon dioxide emissions. Especially among them, carbon dioxide emissions from aluminum smelting sector account for 87% of the total. Since different types of metals have different characteristics and production process, the determinants for the carbon intensity are also different. However, what's the revolution of the inequality and what's the main driving factor behind it? To explore it, we made a decomposition model. We divided carbon dioxide emissions intensity inequalities into 11 components, especially on the aspects of technology and efficiency. And we found this indicates that the inequality of energy-oriented economy of scale in the smelting industry was very large, which led to the inequality of low-carbon economic development. However, the impact of SEE on the inequalities of MI and AMMRP was negative. And the results show that the ICI index, which represented the inequality, was in a downward trend during 2004 to 2010, while remained stable during 2010 to 2017. And the PEE was the key parameter to increase the inequality, and PI and SEE were the primary inhibiting factor for it. So the government can reduce inter-inequalities by improving the resource allocation efficiency and technical efficiency in the energy market. I believe climate change is a comprehensive issue with many dimensions, like technology, science, economy, and politics. Of course, we can find solutions from those aspects, but as young people, I think we should do more international cooperation. Anyway, using the world's power to solve the world's problem. That's all about my research. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. Thank you for your presentation. And next, let's welcome Ge Rile to talk about carbon neutral, China set of the global revolution. Welcome. Can you hear us? You can directly share your screen and start your presentation, please. And if there's any problem on your side, please contact us. Even type in the word so we can be acknowledged. On this occasion, let's welcome Jhin Chua to talk about on the way to realize carbon neutrality. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you. You can start right now.
Okay.
Excuse me, Jhin, could you please for your screen to play the...
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. Good evening, our experts and scholars. My name is Jhin, and I'm honored to participate in this academic conference. Next, I will do about 3 minutes of my article content report. My article is on the realization of the peace of carbon neutral. This position is divided into 3 parts. Firstly, why did I choose this topic? And secondly, the innovation of this paper last year. And finally, what is the practical goal? Firstly, why and reasons for choosing topic. In today's year of rapid development of science, technology, and economy in the world, carbon emissions have an increasing impact on the ecology, environment, and human survival. In conservation and emission reduction work, join up a timetable and roadmap for carbon peaking and carbon neutrality. The following is to discuss the pace of our country's carbon neutrality. And secondly, innovation. The difference of this article is that we're grasping the hot topic of current politics. From the current development of the country, we can see the innovation piece in the field of ecological construction and the perspective of innovation and development. We can see how China's concrete problems are specifically analyzed, how to deal with the need to change the energy system, scientific and technology, research and development, market structure, policy mechanism in 4 areas. That is very important. And this is my article, important part. Firstly, the background, and secondly, the meaning of carbon neutrality, and thirdly, the necessity of my country to achieve carbon neutrality goals, and finally, the main piece for my country to achieve the goal of carbon neutrality. And finally, practical goal, we can divide it into 4 pieces. Firstly, promoting the energy transformation and uprooting, and secondly, promoting green technology innovation, and next we will promote market system innovation in an orderly manner, and finally stressing national governance capacity. And thank you for your attention. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Jhin. And next, let's welcome Jhin Chua to talk about corporate
gentlemen, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you may start the presentation, please.
I start my speech today. So I'm very glad to attend the JUC event today. So welcome to my project, and my research topic is on the corporate ESG performance and institutional behavior. And this is also regarding my master's project. So here is the agenda today. In the first part, 50 years ago, the Nobel laureates defined the social responsibility of business is to maximize the profits of the shareholders. And his view was named as the shareholder theory and has been popular until today. However, his point of view was challenged by our deep alumni. So in this way, in 1984, Friedman put forward the stakeholder theory and argued that the corporate performance is comprehensively influenced by the stakeholders, employees, community NGOs, and so on. So the debate between the shareholders and stakeholders has set the foundation on how we making the investing decisions. So let's talk about how the investors make a profit. Institutional investors can refer to a group of talented people. They gather money from the public like us. And they invest in the stock market on behalf of us to earn all the profit from the added value. Their interest in target companies and take an amount of equity, which is called the institutional ownership. There are many different types of the institutional investors, such as pension fund and venture capital. When they are making investment decisions, they need to evaluate and target stock and follow a certain guidelines and principles. Those guidelines and principles are how we can have an ESG investing later. Due to the different investing themes and preferences, the investment managers create different investing strategies. So here, now let's move to the ESG investing. ESG investing is sub-investing category of strategy under sustainable investing field, which represents the environment, society, and the governance. ESG investing seeks the positive returns and long-term effect on sustainable development. In short, ESG investing cares about not only financial performance, but also non-financial performance. So I developed the literature review demonstrated the institutional investor are motivated to hold the companies with high ESG profile, and they have longer investing horizons. However, the research gap in this field is that the relationship between ESG performance and financial performance is a debated topic. So there is a lack of empirical evidence to support effectiveness of ESG strategies. And additionally, since China's local ESG market started very late, and so there is a very few research. So based on the literature review and the research data, I developed two research questions. The first one is whether corporate ESG performance is associated with institutional ownership. And the second is how ESG performance will influence corporate financial performance. I'm taking an alternative method to conduct my research. So, I got my data source from the Singapore Corporate Finance ESG data sets, which is all the data source, and go to the conclusion part. So in the research design, I constructed the ORS regression model and the fixed effect model. The ORS is used to test whether ESG score has an impact on institutional ownership. And the control variables are RA and the firm size. But the dependent variable is the institutional ownership, and the main independent variable is the ESG score. So the fixed effect model is used to remove omitted variables bias by marrying changes within groups across time. I introduced the dummy variables in the industry. The mu is the constant and epsilon is the error term. So the result is shown in this page. So the ORS results show that there is a positive relation between the ESG score and the institutional ownership with a 95% statistical significance. Specifically, when percent increase in ESG score will result in around 0.038 standard deviations increase in the institutional ownership. So this table shows the result of the fixed effect model. The first column is the Euler as regression. From the group 2 to the group 4 are fixed effects model. I introduced the dummy variables one by one. In group 2, I introduced the time. Group 3, I introduced both time and industry. However, neither of them are statistically meaningful. Then, I tested whether there is a nonlinear relation by introducing squared ESG score in the group 4. Surprisingly, I found a downward opening quadratic function. This means that there under each industry, ESG score and institutional ownership are related at 99% significant level. This demonstrated that there is a cutoff point in the ESG performance, which means that there before the cutoff points, ESG score is positively related to the institutional ownership, while after the cutoff point, it shows a negative relation. So here is my interpretation. From the Euler regression model, we can infer that ESG score and institutional ownership are positively related, because a better ESG performance can stimulate the institutional investors' confidence and motivation to increase their equity investment. So from the fixed effects model under the thermal industry, the ESG score and institutional ownership have a quadratic relationship with downward opening. When companies initially increase their ESG performance, institutional investors show confidence and motivation to increase their investment. However, when it crosses the cutting point, the institutional ownership will decrease. So there is a reverse effect if companies overly pay attention to the ESG governance. So this can probably discourage the main businesses of the companies. So in conclusion, this research has provided empirical evidence on how ESG performance can positively influence the investors' behavior. Additionally, this research has offered a new finding under the fixed effects of industry. There is a nonlinear relation between ESG and institutional holdings. There are two major limitations of the study. First, ESG ratings actually have three sub-level ratings with different weights. And this research only considers the final rating rather than subgroup analysis of the weights of different indicators. Additionally, due to different types of institutional investment, they have different preferences in the investing strategies. A subgroup analysis of institutional investors is necessary as well. The second limitation of this research is it only uses the China's local ESG rating datasets. It would be more objective to conduct a comparison research between Chinese rating agencies and international agencies. And finally, these are the references I used for the research, and here are the acknowledgements for my project. And thank you for your listening.
Thank you for your presentation, Jhin Chua. As we still have time left, so the delegates after Jhin Chua, you may take your time and you can even specify your points. So now, let's welcome Yang Nan to talk about a potential consumer-side carbon trading product. Welcome. Yang Nan, are you online? Can you hear us? If you just go back to our Zoom room, please contact our staff. And next, let's welcome Mr. Das Romero to talk about the climate policy making in essence, achieving SDG via ICT policy innovation. Welcome.
Hello everyone. Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Yang Minan from Tianjin University. It's a pleasure to be here to introduce our team project, No Carbon, which is a potential consumer-side carbon trading product. So before the introduction, please watch the video. When we talk about carbon emission, we might think that production emission is far more than consumption emission. But one interesting thing is that carbon emission from the consumption side of the city have actually exceeded those from the production side. For example, in Beijing and Shanghai, the consumption side is 1.4 and 1.7 times higher than the production side, respectively. Therefore, our project focuses on household carbon consumption reduction and tries to achieve household carbon neutrality. By reviewing previous cases such as the carbon trading schemes in the US, we found that it is important to make the product scientific, fun, motivating to promote youth engagement. Thus, we designed an application attached to in WeChat small program providing carbon accounting for families. It promotes low carbon behavior in households through incentives and scientific carbon accounting method. It can also provide sound advice to households on carbon consumption. In addition, we have developed a game, Carbon Pad, to attract young people to participate in carbon reduction. To collaborate with the CSR sector, we have partnership with Oppo. Our carbon pad will be integrated into Oppo's mobile application, Voice Assistant, and help create a sustainable and biodiversity-oriented community. We call for the youth over the world to become the low-carbon activists in their daily life. If you're interested in no carbon, please scan the QR code and test our product and join us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, and we are looking forward to your product. Next, let's welcome Dice Romero to talk about the climate policy making nations achieving SDG via ICT policy innovation. Welcome. Dice Romero, could you hear us? It's your turn, and you could directly share the screen now.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, welcome. We can hear you.
Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
I
you.
can hear you. Perfect. Do I have to share my own screen? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Just 1 second. Yes. Okay. I apologize for the delay. My connection is not so good because I'm in Scotland currently.
It's alright.
But now should be connected. There we go. Perfect. Can everybody see?
Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Yes, we do. Perfect. It's gonna be a short presentation. So I am Raul Freitas. I'm from Paraguay. I'm a PhD student in the University of Lisbon, Portugal. Now we'll talk about the policy and science. So my very short paper presentation is regarding policy problems that are induced by climate change characteristics. So we know policy, science policy, the concept of social science and policy making is a concept that has been introduced in the 1950s. So it's a relatively new social scientific process that is utilized to address societal issues like education, poverty, economics, and so on. And with the arrival of the issue of climate change in the late 70s and early 80s, the problem of climate change has slowly been creeping and introducing into the political agenda. And this has represented many challenges for policymakers and decision makers across the world to properly address the problem. So since the policy making process is a relatively new one, it has been very lacking in terms of innovation and introduction of new concepts, and specifically within the issue of climate change. So to understand why there is a policy in science process, in the policy making process, we have to first understand the characteristics of climate change. So climate change is a very complex problem, as we may know, because it does not obey non-linear dynamics, and it also intrinsically complex and interconnected to even further more environmental phenomena that are beyond our comprehension and beyond our power to understand and tackle it. And that creates an environment of uncertainty that is rooted both in imperfect science, so our knowledge and science, although very developed, is still lacking, and also intrinsically uncertain, which are problems that are irreducible. Thus, we have the policy responses that are adaptable and resilient based. So adaptable is based on the imperfect science, and resilience is based on the irreducible problems of climate change. Then we have the most well-known characteristic, which is the large temporal and spatial scale climate change. Climate change reaches all countries, all nations, regardless of the socioeconomic standards, and it impacts them positively, obviously, depending on the socioeconomic and resources availability of a nation. They will be hit harder than others. Then we have the irreversible nature of climate change, which, as we may know, there are certain tipping points that once they are surpassed, the life supporting system of the planet will not be able to recover from it. And that this will lead to the lasting consequences, which are acidification of oceans, heavy levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, potential extinction events, which are issues and problems that are beyond human capability to properly tackle and address. So this is where the policy in science is created, because policymakers have never been able to address an issue like climate change. Because we have not only do we have these characteristics, but we also have a deadline to act upon these issues. Simultaneously, the implementation of a policy does not always result in a positive outcome. It can be negative and neutral. And when a policy is neutral or negative, it has an impact that will echo through time in a nation, in a government, or in a region, and that could potentially harm, hinder, or impede future policy action. Additionally, one of the reasons why policy development in regards to climate change has been quite stalled is due to the fact that most policy development follows certain economical-based path in the form of cost effectiveness or cost feasibility, which obviously is a very shallow approach regarding the complexity of climate change. So here we have a lack of climate policy instruments and a climate portfolio which sadly does not exist in the world regarding policy evaluation, because the policy is a cycle of acknowledging a societal problem, analyzing the societal problem, introducing the societal problem into the political agenda, selecting options to address the societal problem, choosing the most feasible solution, implemented it, and then evaluated and assessed it if it was a success or a failure. And in this regard, a climate policy portfolio does not exist, which hinders any attempt of future policy development, especially in developing nations which have no access to resources or economical or financial means to develop complex and innovative approaches to adapt or to create resilience approach against climate change. And in addition, we have the unique characteristics of climate change, which hinders the process. And all this creates a policy cycle that creates insight, in the sense that policymakers repeat themselves, making their own mistakes, because due to the lack of data or due to the lack of portfolios to base their decisions, and they cannot do so. So they have to base their decisions in assumptions regarding the potential outcomes of policy making in regards to climate change. So quoting Rollins and Giessen, pandemic uncertainties arise from insufficient models necessitates to set boundaries in accuracy measurements and other issues that systemically generate ignorance. And as a function, to construct knowledge, we create this policy in science system. So these conditions, in part, create the lack of policy making instruments and techniques regarding both climate and policy data collection. But this can be met by investing in policy, information, and communication technologies such as Internet of Things or IoT. So here, for example, this is a prototype climate monitor system that we are developing in Portugal with the help of the Agency of Small and Medium Companies and Innovation, based on the Horizon 2020 program, in which we have sensors that collect data based on essential climate indicators that are created through databases like Copernicus or IPCC or UNFCC. And we also develop climate indicators for policies that they want to implement. So indicators for agricultural policies, indicators for maritime and sea indicators, cities indicators, CO2 and greenhouse emissions indicators. So we can, if we create indicators, we can manage to extract raw data about the subject and be able to, as see here, be able to produce and analyze that data. So we can curate it and process it to the decision-making process, and also be able to monitor those policies in order to avoid potential negative or neutral effects. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing, and we really enjoyed it. Next, let's welcome Zhang Haoran to share the analysis of the environmental impact of the Formula E event in Monaco. Welcome.
Thank you, and I think next is my turn, and can I start now?
Yeah, you can just start the presentation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I think I cannot hear the sound from the line in this university. If you can hear my voice, then I will start my presentation today. Good evening, everyone. My name is Haoran, and today I will present my research of the life cycle analysis of the Formula E event and Formula 1 event in Monaco. And here is our team from KTH Yale Institute of Technology, UBC, and EIT Inner Energy. First of all, why Formula E event and Formula 1 event? Let me give you a very brief introduction. As we all know, the number of the electric vehicles go high year by year. But wait, does that mean the electric vehicles is really sustainable than the, let's say, traditional vehicles? Not really. It depends on which kind of electricity the electricity used to charging the batteries. For example, we can have a look at the right-hand figure. We can hear the electric vehicles charging by the electricity from the fossil fuels. The carbon emissions of these can be higher than that of the traditional car powered by petrol. So it is very important to compare the carbon footprint between the Formula 1 event and the Formula E event. This is our main objective, to perform a life cycle LCA, the life cycle assessment, and the carbon footprint analysis for the event. And not only the risk itself, but also some other parameters, for example, the infrastructure, the vehicle's transportation, and the traveling for the spectators, the food drinks in the venue, and so forth. And the scope is gate-to-gate for the risk itself, and gradle-to-gradle for the rest of the categories. For the methodology, we use the OpenLCA as the software, and we can see all the input and output parameters here. So let's start from the data assumption, data collection. For example, here we show the infrastructure and also the vehicle transportation and also the race itself for the Formula E and Formula 1. And also we collect the data for the spectator transportation and the food and drinks consumed in the venue of the Formula 1 and Formula E events. I would say this is a highlight of our research. Why? Because the truth is there are no complete papers or data that contains the in-depth information about the environmental impact of the Formula E event. And many parameters, I would say most of the parameters of the racing vehicles are actually non-complete information. So our work, our data can be expected to promote the further research. And let's have a look at the results from the OpenLCA software. We make some tables to make it clear to do the comparison. For the table, we observe that the most impacted category are actually the traveling for the spectators, as shown on the screen, and the freight of the vehicles, as well as the food and drinks consumption. And each category is more harmful for different indicators. As we can see, the freight here is actually a great impact on the climate change, for example. And as the amount of spectators has a great influence in the result, we decided to analyze both events, assuming the same amount of attendees for both Formula E and Formula 1. Therefore, we increased the spectators for Formula E event, and we performed the analysis again. The results were still showing that Formula 1 has a greater impact due to other categories and the nature of the event itself. Then we decided to perform a sensitivity analysis by charting the amount of the spectators attending the event by the means of transport. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, we did the analysis. We established a baseline scenario where the people coming from within France using car represent the higher amount, and the highest amount of the people coming from the rest of the world were using airline. And then the results show, as shown here, for the scenario 2, it has the lowest amount of the carbon dioxide emissions. It can be reduced at 9% compared with the baseline scenario. So here is our conclusion. In conclusion, the Formula 1 event has a high environmental impact and footprint for sure. And if you have further questions, welcome to contact with us. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for presentation. Thank you. And next, let's welcome Cai Meng to talk about developing a high-resolution emission inventory tool for low-carbon city management using hybrid method, a pilot test in high-density Hong Kong. Welcome.
In business dynamic type of PhD student from Chinese University of Hong Kong. And my topic is developing a high-resolution emission inventory tool for low-carbon city management, a pilot test in high-density Hong Kong. Combating climate change is an important issue across the world. President Xi Jinping's speech delivered to the United Nations made it clear that China would endeavor to achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. In Hong Kong, the local government just announced that the Hong Kong government will strive to achieve carbon neutrality. With previous sorry, by comparing our studies with previous studies, this study has demonstrated higher reduced emissions in urban areas and also lower emissions in less populated areas. This study also shows higher transport emissions in important transit hubs. Therefore, our results can never reveal spatial patterns of urban carbon emissions in Hong Kong due to the final spatial grid and considerations of other forms. To sum up, this study has developed a hybrid method to model high-resolution carbon emission and adopting all the other form data. And this method was demonstrated for Hong Kong, and we have produced annual carbon emission maps for different sectors. The validation results have shown robustness and broad application of methods. This study has been published in the Energy and Building Journal. In future, we propose online open database platform, visualize carbon emission map platform, and emission inventory server for global users. We'll also extend this study to the regional level for the Greater Bay Area and eventually for global cities. Thank you. That's all for my report. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And at last, let's welcome Zhang Lanlan to talk about performance comparative study of a concentrating photovoltaic thermal phase change system with different heat sinks. Welcome.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Zhang Lanlan from Hebei University of Technology. The presentation of my report today is performance comparative study of concentrating PVT CPCM system with different heat sinks. As we know, the carbon picking and neutrality has been proposed at university with the development of energy consumption and emission reduction. Renewable energy such as solar energy, considering as the mainstay and the coordinated development with energy store technology has become the core way to decarbonize energy production. In our study, we have constructed the concentrating PVT CPCM system with different heat sinks, named S-type and U-type respectively. Step 1 is the setup of optimal model of CPC. The mode cover method is used to evaluate the irradiance distribution on PV surface using self-made code in MATLAB. It can be seen that the Coulter diagram of irradiance and the temperature distribution taken by thermal imager has a good agreement. Step 2 is the experiment method. The outdoor experiment is constructed in Tianjin, China. Next is the result analysis of the experiment. Here is the meteorological parameters and the temperature variation. The results have been shown that PCM can effectively improve the temperature non-uniformity of PV models, and the system exploring U-type heat sinks has better temperature regulation performance. Besides, the output power and the electricity of U-type are always higher than S-type for the higher output voltage and current. Also, it was found that corrective calorimetrical relationship between the pressure drop and the fluid mass flow rate. The pressure loss and the pumping power consumption of S-type are over 3 times of U-type. Finally, the thermoelectrical and primary energy efficiency of proposed PVT CPCM system separate PT6 and PV6 system is fitted, showing the primary energy efficiency using S-type system is higher than U-type, and these are both higher than the conventional systems. To sum up, this work studied the overall thermal and electrical performance of concentrated PVT phase change system. Advantages for the heat electricity cogeneration are presented, which could help promote the population of PVT system. Further provide guides for superior utilization of solar energy facing the organization, carbon emissions, and energy demand. Okay, that's all my presentation. Thank you all for your listening.
Thank you, Zhang Lanlan. Discussion And if you still have any problem or want to contact another delegate, you could contact them through the email address we've put forward afterwards on our pamphlet. And lastly, let's welcome our Mr. Song to give us a summary speech. Welcome.